Hi. In this podcast, we take a look at how to format your screenplay if you're on the film side and you're interested in that. One of the questions that comes up is, why are the rules in the first place? If I'm telling my story, why do I have to follow these rules? It's my screenplay. I should be able to write it how I want. Well, the reason for that is that Hollywood learned early on, especially after the silent era, that it wanted industry standards. Producers would receive lots of different screenplays from lots of different writers, and everybody would have their own style, and it just got to be a little distracting. So they wanted consistent rules and industry standards. And today, they don't like excessive showiness. So they don't like graphics in your screenplay or images. They don't like cover pages that are, excessively showy. And because when you do that, those types of things, it tends to scream to them like, oh, I'm just trying to show off. So that's why there are rules. And what are some of the basic rules? Well, in terms of font, they want your font to be in Courier New. They don't like, and maybe even Courier, but they don't want Times New Roman. They want Courier New. And the reason for that, by the way, is that before the age of computers, when people just had typewriters, this was the standard font, and that just never changed over the years. Then they want your screenplay to be 3-hole punched with brads in the first and third rings, not the second, for whatever reason. That's just the way that it's always been. And the brads, by the way, are those little metal things that go between the hole punches. And so they want a 3-hole punch with brads in the first and the third. And let's just take a look here at a sample screen, like a title page from a screenplay. You notice here that the title is Tracy, and it's written in all caps. Notice that it's not in bold-faced, it doesn't have a huge font, it's not underlined, it's not italics. You just simply have the title in all caps. And then 2 spaces below that you have written by, or you can put screenplay by. And then 2 spaces below that goes your name. Now here, of course, we blocked out the name, but that would be where your name is. Then a few spaces below that, you put down registered, comma, WGA. And WGA just stands for Writers Guild of America. And you could even put the registration number. You don't necessarily have to. Sometimes they might prefer that. But in any case, you want to definitely indicate that your work is registered, so that will protect you from, if someone tries to steal it. And then, of course, 2 spaces below that goes the date. And then a few spaces below that goes your mailing address. And you also want to include your email address and your phone number. And then here, this is how the story starts out in the screenplay. You will notice, first off, right off the bat, that you're going to have page numbers. This is page number 1, so you want to include page numbers for every page, not the title page, but every other page. Then you see here how this writer starts out. They actually insert a title card and to indicate that it's Thursday. That's not even necessary. I mean, sometimes I guess it might be relevant and important, but if you can, try to avoid that. But in any case, though, you would start out your story with a fade in, and that's in all caps, and you just put fade in, colon, and then every scene that you start has to either be interior or exterior. Interior or exterior. And interior is just indicated by INT, period, and external exterior is just EXT, period. And then after that, where you're establishing whether it's interior or exterior, you would put the actual setting. So in this case, it's a bedroom room. And then you would put a dash, and you have to always indicate what time it is. Is it morning, day, or night? And that's standard for how you would start every scene that you're going to start out with. And then you will notice too that when the story starts here, the first line is the person is introducing the character, and every time you introduce a character for the first time, you have to put their name in all caps. Now every other time you don't. Every other time you mention them, they don't have to be in all caps, but the very first time that you're introducing the character, you always put them in all caps. And you will see here one thing that this writer does right off the bat that they advise not to do. You'll see here that he starts out with a song, Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. The reason why that's discouraged is because a lot of times it might be hard for a studio to get the license to be able to use certain songs, so they generally say to try to avoid that if you can, but in any case. Now, scrolling down here, you will notice that before the next scene starts, if you see here towards on the right part of the screen, he actually puts cut to colon. Now, you don't actually have to necessarily do that. A lot of times these programs that you get, these screenwriting programs that you can get, and by the way, if you can just go on and do a Google search, and you can find some free screenwriting programs out there. And there's others though that do cost money. There's one called Final Cut Pro, or excuse me, Final Draft Pro, Final Draft, and you'll see here that they put cut to. They say that you don't actually have to do it, but what happens is, but you can, and a lot of times these screenwriting programs will automatically do that for you. You know, you can put cut to, dissolve to, and things like that, but you don't necessarily have to. Now, on this slide, you will see here that whenever you're using dialogue, you will notice that the dialogue actually is more towards the center of the screen, and you always have the character's name in all caps for every line of dialogue that they have. And technically speaking, the dialogue here, even though it looks like it's to the center, it actually goes a little bit. If you're looking at the page, it actually looks a little bit right to center. You can do some research on the exact margins that they specify for that if you're doing this in Microsoft Word. Again, if you have one of these screenwriting software programs, that they will automatically do this for you. But in any case, though, the dialogue is not just simply listed. It's actually tabbed over and more centered than the other stuff, which is obviously flush left. Now here, this is where this screenplay ends. Just a couple things here. Again, you see at the top here, dissolve to before the scene starts. You don't necessarily have to do that, but you can. And you will notice here that when the story ends, it always ends this way. In pretty much every screenplay they say to do this. When you're ending the story, you always will continue or finish the scene, then you put fade out in all caps. You know, at the beginning of the story, it's fade in. Here you go fade out, and then simply 2 spaces below that, you put the end in all caps and underlined. And technically speaking, that the end part can actually be flush left. In this case, it's centered, but either way is okay. And that is how you would, those are some of the basic rules for how you would format your screenplay.